So please welcome on stage The Edge.
Hi, guys. Wow. This is cool. This is so cool. One of the things people don't know about our band is that when we were in school, we managed to benefit from the tuition of some great music teachers. And, it was nothing to do with rock and roll. It was Renaissance choral music and all kinds of stuff. But I think all of us got a lot out of that. And so we've maintained this belief, this strong belief in the idea of music education, which is why we co-founded Music Generation. But Bimm being centred in Dublin is such a cool thing. I'm really delighted to be able to be here and support what I think is an incredibly useful, helpful thing for the rock and roll scene in Dublin. So I don't want to bore the arse off you, so I'll just say a few things. I'm sure you'll be relieved to hear I'm not going to start telling you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm not really into advice as such. My favorite thing about advice, in fact, is that you don't have to take it. And the truth is, no one can really tell you how to find your voice as a musician or artist. Your starting out point is your own, and no one will take the same path as you. And when it comes to finding your voice, it's all about one thing, which is what Eugene Peterson calls a long obedience in the same direction. If you know what success is for you and you put the time in, you definitely will get there. I recommend you read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, and his 10,000-hour theory, and particularly the chapter on the Beatles. It's really amazing. Oh shit, that was advice. Sorry about that. In the case of our band, we never really sat down with a plan to try and take over the world. We just decided early on to dedicate our lives to the idea of U2. Whatever the result, and to us, age 17, U2 wasn't the most important thing in our lives. It was the only important thing in our lives. Punk rock came along in the nick of time. In 1977, we were the essential garage band from garage land. But punk gave us the ability, the alibi, to take it seriously at a point where our level of musicianship just didn't really give us the right to do that. But at that point, we knew that the fact that we weren't great musicians didn't really matter. We made use of our limitations, and our limitations actually became our greatest asset because they ended up becoming the gateway to originality for us. And I actually went to college not far from here, in Kevin Street, for a very brief time in 1979, because I promised I would if I hadn't got a deal a year after leaving school. But it was too late. At that point, I'd lost any interest in anything other than the band. And I remember one night sleeping on Paul McGuinness's couch after a Stiff Little Fingers gig in McGonagall's, and waking up the next morning and saw Paul had one of my books in his hand, and on the cover it says chemistry notes. He's skipping through the pages, and all that was in there was U2 lyrics, set lists, chord charts for new songs. And it was just obvious at that point there was nothing else that I was going to ever do with my life. So that commitment, which we all shared at that point, was unshakable and unconditional. We just were in. So that commitment, I think, was probably the most important element of us becoming the band that we became. In the 80s, when The Enemy, that magazine, the most Stalinist, belligerent, caustic, but the most essential, inky to read, came up with the term careerist. It was a slag, it was a slur. It was meant to signify an artist who had kind of one eye on popularity and commercialism and maybe wasn't as artistically true as the others. But we early on, we actually saw through that kind of mentality, and we'd no time for that. We didn't see a contradiction between great work and it being commercially successful. And we realized that the really great music is actually always pretty successful. It's popular. And there's a lot of really bad stuff that at the time of being released is considered kind of artistically worthy, but actually in the final analysis is not really that great. A great song is a great song, no matter what you might say about it. And by the way, that was a warning, that wasn't advice, just to point that out. So our success came actually gradually. In fact, we almost got dropped after our second album, October. And the reason we didn't is kind of telling. When we first negotiated our first record deal with Island Records, one of the things that we really fought for was artistic control. So we had in our contract the right that we decided what went on every album. We decided what the artwork was going to be, and a whole list of other controls that a young band like never got. So the label said, if you guys want all those controls, I'm afraid we're just not going to be able to give you big advances because you've just increased the risk level for us, so we're going to give you the bare minimum. And we actually really felt strongly about those controls, so we said, fine, no problem. We'll take really low advances. And then the advances were so low, we ended up having to live at home. All of us lived at home for the first few years of the band. First album did quite well. Second album, October, came out, and there was no hit. So the sales kind of stalled. And at that moment, we realized, we could be dropped because, 2 albums in, no big hit song. A lot of bands in that position are let go. But Island Records realized that the advance that they had to pay for the third album was so small that they just decided to roll the dice. And the next album was War. It did well, sold really well, and we were secure. But it's interesting that by not costing the label a lot of money, we actually saved ourselves. U2's career could have ended before it began if we'd had the mentality of looking out for the big advances, the big bucks. So that, without us realizing, turned out to be very smart. One other thing that happened along the way that I remembered and I thought I might share with you today was a little later when the Joshua Tree was about to come out. We were called to a meeting with the head of Island Records at the time. His name was Dave Robinson. And he said, look guys, we got all this amazing advertising campaign booked for the album. And he showed us the artwork for these giant billboards that were going to go up all over London. And he was really excited about this. And we all sat there looking at these pieces of paper with the billboards, and we looked at each other, and we all agreed, like, without saying a word, that this was wrong. So we told Dave, we said, we don't want billboards. And he was totally confused, crestfallen, quite frustrated. He was going, what are you talking about? And we sort of sat there for about 45 minutes, and we explained that we just didn't think it was right for us at that moment. We didn't want our fans to think that we'd suddenly changed from a band that were mostly concerned about the art into a band that seemed to be mostly concerned about making money. And we didn't think it was necessary. and we thought it was inconsistent with the theme of the album, and we had a bunch of other reasons. So in the end, we didn't do billboards. And he said, I remember, kind of angrily as we left the room, he said, "You know, life is short, and you're probably gonna regret this." And to be honest, we've never looked back. So he didn't. I don't think he'd thought it through. But what I remember about that moment was realizing that we had to be the guardians of the work. Now, subsequently, as other projects came up, we got heavily into billboards. And it was, Pop Mart, whatever. It wasn't the problem of the idea of a billboard. But for that record, for that moment in our career, we knew we needed to take a different path. So a few other things I want to share. And this is these are the secrets now. I found out that unlike advice, which I told you I don't like, criticism is your friend. I welcome it with open arms because it always makes me better. But to be able to get the most value out of criticism, you have to keep your ego in check. The more difficult the criticism is to hear, probably the more useful it is. And the thing to remember if you're in a band or a duo or whatever is that everybody overestimates the importance of their contribution and simultaneously underestimates the value of everyone else's. That's just the way it is. Now, if you realize that, then you're in a great place because you kind of will avoid falling into the worst traps of the runaway ego. Because in the end, it is out of control egos that break up bands, not musical differences. Musical differences are actually really a good thing, particularly between friends. A sense of entitlement is a very dangerous thing. We have always tried to be as objective and as hard on our work as we can be. We always ask ourselves the question, does this piece of music have a reason to exist? And if you can't hold the room with it, or I guess clear the room with it, then probably the answer is no. So the worst conceit of any artist is to say that it's the audience's fault when the music isn't going over. It's never, ever the audience's fault. When music stops being a pleasure and an inspiration and starts to resemble work, I know that it's time to take a break. Technique and craft are useful, but creativity is about accessing your imagination. And that only happens when you're in the zone and you're actually having fun with it. Someone once said that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be experienced. And I think music is the same, but even more. And then a couple of more things that I think I can point to as true in my case, our band as well, is that taking risks is crucial. Without taking risks, you don't get anywhere cool. Sam Beckett put it beautifully when he said that we need to fail better. So failure is not in any way to be avoided, it's to be factored in, fail better if you can. The worst thing can happen to your music if you stay in your comfort zone all the time. It starts to sound comfortable. And that's really, I think, a terrible sound for anything. You want it to sound urgent. It's got to sound like you're really kind of at the fringe of your skill to pull it off. So comfortable is nothing. There's nothing good about it. And taking yourself too seriously is also somehow it's a kind of crippling problem. Taking the work seriously is fine, but you've got to be able to laugh at yourself. You've got to have that, what we call a sort of perspective, to see your strengths and weaknesses and actually be okay about admitting them and embracing them. Because if you are too uptight to relax and accept who you are as an artist, you're always going to be in that insecure place, and you're never going to get to the cool stuff that you'd be capable of. Success can be many different things, and everyone's definition is going to be different. No matter how good you become within your own frame of reference, there's no guarantee that the world is going to beat a path to your door. But if that is your definition of success, one thing that seems to be true is if you try too hard to please, the world will lose interest. The best way to become commercially successful is to ignore the world and concentrate on the work. Or as my friend Nicholas Klein, who wrote these metaphysical equations, would put it, the quality of the intention always dictates the outcome. So if you are trying to make music that blows your own mind, there's a pretty good chance you're going to blow other people's mind. But if you're going to try and make music that's just going to be pleasant, people are going to drift off pretty fast. So all of you students of Bimm have dedicated a number of years now to your chosen disciplines, and I'm sure it feels right now like you've still a lot to prove and a lot to achieve. But the truth is, you are already successful. You're here. You're about to graduate. You live in Ireland. And you're on the path. And that's where we all are. So I want to wish you the best of luck, and I look forward to seeing you on down the road. Thank you.